Somewhere in Oregon, 1845, 7 figures make their way across a landscape. It's somber, brittle, vast. They're seeking the West, a veritable Eden of riches beyond imagining. Maybe they're just looking for water. In Kelly Reichardt's Meek's Cutoff from 2010, life hangs delicately in the balance. Tempers, temperaments, social roles, gender roles, these things shift more quickly than the landscape, but the landscape doesn't change very much. This is MoobTube, a podcast for all y'all out on the Oregon Trail. And joining me in this ill-fated journey across the sands are Ralph Pritchard as ever, and Lara Alonso Corona, writer, translator, and they said I could say this, failed film school dropout. I shouldn't say failed film school dropout, so successful film school dropout. Successfully dropped out of film school. That's probably
We've got 2 film school dropouts here.
We've got 3 dropouts altogether. This is like
3 dropouts.
Dropout triptych here. This is amazing. So Lara, like you chose Meek's Cutoff. Introduce us a little bit.
I've always been, ever since I saw All Joy, Kelly Reichardt's second film, but kind of the first in her own style. I've been fascinated by her style. I watched Meek's Cutoff on the biggest screen, which I think I would recommend to everybody. It'd be hard to do in lockdown, but I don't know. I was really blown away by how confident a filmmaker is and how deliberate she is. And I'm very familiar with all her movies. I don't know, you guys, have you?
I'm really not. I've seen Meek's Cutoff before. I'd forgotten I'd seen it actually. It was until I was watching it. I was like, "Fuck, this is I've watched this." It's kind of slipped back in, but I haven't. I know of her pretty well, but I don't think I've seen again unless I've accidentally seen. I don't know about you, Ralph. Have you seen more than Meek's Cutoff?
I think I've seen most of her films. I think the one I haven't seen is the one about the cow.
First Cow. Oh, it's pretty good.
I haven't seen that one.
I've heard this is really good.
I've seen Night Moves, which is so there's Rivers of Grass, which was one she made like 10 years before she made her second film, and I don't really remember much about that. But Old Joy is like very much, as you say, in the Reichardt style. Meek's Cutoff I've seen. Wendy and Lucy, which is very kind of realist and pared back, simple kind of story about a woman in a very difficult situation. There's a dog tied up outside a shop, accusations of theft, assault, and then Night Moves, which is this kind of eco-terrorist thriller with Jesse Eisenberg, which I think was probably meant to be a bit more successful than it was. But I think all of her work is quite underplayed.
Kind of doing a more kind of Hollywood bigger, was that her attempt at doing a sort of bigger Hollywood film?
I think it was her producer's attempt probably, but I think she just makes it in her own. It's very similar to Meek's Cutoff. It's just a different context, if I recall correctly. But I don't think I've seen. Oh, and I've seen Certain Women. She did the one with the 3 women, Laura Dern and Kristen Stewart.
Laura Dern's great.
And yeah, that's really beautiful. Actually, that's a more conceptual piece. But then I haven't seen the First Cow.
I've heard First Cow is really great. Just like
it's very much film. Another Western.
Is it another Western? Okay,
it's kind of another Western. Yeah.
I feel like they're all Westerns in a certain way.
Yeah, Wendy and Lucy is a Western.
Yeah, I mean, Lara, what do you think Kelly Reichardt's like draw to the West? Why is she attracted to the Western as a genre? Do you think?
I'm not sure she would agree with that, because when Meek's Cutoff came out, she insisted she wasn't making a Western, she was making a desert poem. I don't think she likes Westerns very much. Which fair enough, because I don't either.
I've fallen in love with her already. This is just calling it a desert poem. I mean, so let's talk that through a bit. So you think why do you think she's so? Because for all intents and purposes, it's set in the West, it's set in the right era, maybe a little bit earlier than Sergio Leone, the John Waynes, the Deadwoods, all of that. It's set a little bit 1845, right? So she's aware that she's making something that could be misconstrued as Western.
I think she's kind of taking the tropes of Western, like you said, like you have all those elements of classic Western, but she's somehow denying them. Like she keeps the cowboys out of frame. It's always focusing on the women, on the labor. She doesn't shoot in widescreen. She has the Academy ratio, frustrating any kind of spectacular in the visuals. So she's taking the Western, but somehow she's not even revising it. She's denying it.
I think I can definitely see that, because when you said keeping the kind of cowboys out the frame, there's a really good scene where they hit a big river. Like, the irony is that they're searching for water and then they suddenly find way too much water, and they can't cross this river, and they need to make a decision about going south or north. And you see the men talking on the beach, but they're kind of out of audio range. You can, with subtitles, you can see what they're saying.
That's the thing I was really perplexed by, because I turned on the subtitles, and then I thought, should I have turned on this? Like,
yeah,
if in a cinema, would it be loud enough that you could hear them, or are you meant to only just hear them?
I think you're supposed to be in their position, right? You're supposed to be at the position of the women who are back with the wagon train, and they're kind of excluded by definition from that world.
The world that normally excluded women. It was like, ironically, the women were always out of frame in Western.
Yeah, always. And here, obviously, as we'll find out, like the women play the kind of decisive narrative role in this film, and the points of conflict, really, because the men are kind of pretty useless. Like Stephen Meek himself, like the guide, is useless because he's lied about his knowledge of the country. He doesn't really know what he's doing. The men range from kind of amazing indifference, kind of like, oh, it'll be fine, to kind of panic, to one man refuses to, he kind of fulfills the role of this kind of anorexic saint almost. He refuses to drink water, and so the role of the men is actually really diminished. Like the void at the center of the film is the fact that men are supposed to be the hero of these tropes, right? And actually they're pretty useless.
And yet the women are sort of under pressure to kind of reassure the men that the good ideas that the women had were actually there, right? There's a sort of like, there's a kind of humoring that happens to save embarrassment. They're kind of treated as if they are in control of the situation, and actually it would be a lot better if it were pointed out earlier on that they were not in control of things, because it ends up leading them down a path that's not particularly fruitful. No.
Lara, you said that in terms of it was a poem, kind of, you used Kelly Reichardt's phrase. That the overriding sense from this, like you said, there's a focus on labor, it's very little dialogue. There's lots of kind of very wide, even though like you said, there's the Academy ratio, there's almost like wide shots that are squashed into an Academy ratio. It's very weird. And these long transitions between scenes. Like, what kind of, do you think Kelly Reichardt's like consciously making a kind of statement about America or about the West, even while denying it? And do you think she's using poetry to kind of make a maybe contemporary political point, or kind of it's like to forward a conversation about gender? Or do you think it's something other? Do you think it's purely an artistic experiment?
I think it's all of those things, and also an artistic vision, and kind of try to keep the mystery, because her movies, people don't have much backstory. There's almost no psychology in her films. It's all about the character in the circumstance, which are normally economic circumstances, even here too, with the need to immigrate in the Oregon Trail to a better future, or whatever the settlers think they are gonna find. And I think that informs her visuals, trying to not let us know too much about the characters, about their psychology. So we have to keep it in the image more than in anything else.
Yeah, I think that's true, because you're right. There's no grand narrative. We don't know where these people have come from, whether they're already wealthy or not, whether they're what led them to hit the frontier, because obviously the mythos of the frontier in America is this idea of manifest destiny, about the American right to roll west and kind of seize and conquer, and it was kind of dressed up as this, you know, quasi-religious journey. And then she does everything here to kind of quash that, because it's such an ordinary, banal thing. Like, you know, there's so much loving attention paid to, like, labor, and to, you know, fording a river, washing pans, hanging, washing, guiding the ox. Like, everything about it just kind of emphasizes this banality. But the banality kind of, like, has this poetic, beautiful quality to it, because it's so nice to, like, listen to this film. Like, I had headphones on, I was like, the crunching and the muted conversation and the crackling of a fireplace, it's like, it's very, like, just like a kind of massage, like a visual and oral massage almost, like watching this film. But I'm kind of curious, because obviously Reichardt chose not to put the film into context. Maybe Americans know the context, but like Stephen Meek was a real person. Stephen Meek did lead a load of settlers on this unusual path down the stem, which they talk about, and he decided to take a kind of shortcut, and obviously shortcuts lead to long delays. Like, and I think there were hundreds of people in the actual journey, and lots of them died, and it was this big dramatic thing. But like Kelly Reichardt's chosen to, like, simplify it and focus on just a handful of characters who are kind of, I guess, stand-ins for the people who were really on the journey. But the thing I'm most interested in about, maybe most interested about, is their encounter with the Native American. Lara, do you want to kind of talk about that, like the way they encounter this man, and like kind of what it says about them, I guess, because he's the main point of conflict in this film, right?
Reichert is a pretty white director in many ways, so I don't think this is meant to be kind of a critical Western, kind of a deconstruction of all the racism, but yeah, in the end, it's kind of like ironic to how powerless the white men are in the movie, that this Native American and a white woman are the ones who have, like, the power of decision at the end of this kind of odyssey they are going on. And yeah, that subverts a lot of Western tropes. At the same time, we are viewers are not sure if, you know, the Native American is going to lead them to safety, so it doesn't buy into this kind of friendly, selfless native trope either. We are completely in the dark.
The most we learn about the Native American is through Stephen Meek, who spouts all this bullshit, like this vague Orientalist bullshit about, like, savage man. He kind of makes all this stuff up about tribes, and he kind of guesses which tribe he's from. He has no idea. We have no idea this man might be an outcast. They're paranoid that they're being pursued, right? And because he drops something, and there was a scene in the film where he drops something, or they believe he drops something, and there's a big debate that ensues about whether he's leaving signals to other people.
Well, Meek essentially is looking for some kind of power move, and the best kind of power move, like all dictators, is to try and point at some kind of outsider as a threat and claim to be able to solve that problem through kind of brutal force. That's
so they'll forget about his failure.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's very and actually he doesn't succeed. Everyone decides that actually this chap they've come across is probably better alive than dead, and you know, they don't have much else. It's kind of amazing how Meek is overruled in that moment.
Yeah, it is, because he puts himself forward as the insider who understands this land. There's a really good bit where he's talking bullshit about, it's like being at the smoking area in a pub, like midnight on a Friday, right? And he's just talking about, you know, it's like I wear gloves on my feet. You know, I feel the sand, I feel the stones under my feet. I know this land, I know everything. And it's like, mate, you don't know anything. You have no idea where you are. You're kind of guessing about, like, the people that live here. You know nothing about anyone. You don't know the language, because he guesses that this guy's Cayuse, from the Cayuse tribe, but he occasionally talks about Blackfoot, and he kind of lists every tribe he's heard of. And it's a really great moment of watching someone kind of try and bamboozle and mystify people who don't know any better, and they're polite enough, because I get the impression they're relatively well-educated people, right? They're polite, they're godly, I guess, you know, and they're respectful of him because they believe that he might come through, and the men believe more than, you know, the women. But that's where the tension comes from, because ultimately the confrontation is between the women, Steve and Meek, and one of those women stands up for and effectively saves the Native American's life, right? The famous scene, which is reprinted on the DVD box and it's on the film posters, of her holding the gun that it's at Steve and Meek.
And makes the film look like it has more action than it really has.
Totally, yes. Because I
think there's a definite misselling there, which I think I totally understand. Yeah. But I was just looking on image search, and there was there's a kind of quote from a critic, Karina Longworth of The Village Voice, which says, this is on the YouTube trailer uploaded by Movie Trailers for All in 2011. Which says Meek's Cutoff is for all. It's very inclusive. Meek's Cutoff is a real movie with star performances and literal life or death stakes. Really? Which is, like, I guess in point of fact not incorrect, but it does not give the impression of the film at all.
Because you think this is going to be like guns blazing, standoffs, like yeah, you're right. And it's when you actually get there, like you said, Lara, like there's a moment where she points the gun at Stephen Meek, but it's not really a confrontation, because he's actually quite powerless, and he kind of accepts his powerlessness, doesn't he? And he's like, oh, fine, if that's what you want. And just he
almost wants to be proved. He wants something bad to happen, just kind of that will vindicate his projection. But of course, he also knows that he doesn't know. Deep down, he knows that he's kind of talking crap, and so it's very unstable for him, and so he acts in more and more erratic ways.
And we don't know as audience, like,
no, we don't know either.
There's a moment where I think it was Michelle Williams' character who wonders out loud, is he ignorant or evil? And we don't know. I think he's ignorant.
Yeah, I think he's ignorant. It's good though, because there's these really interesting conversations that happen, like these little whispered conversations that happen mostly between the men and wives, you know, at night, and we get these little insights, and often it's the men asking the women what they think, which is quite interesting. He's like, what do you think? And it's a kind of like strange power balance, and sometimes I think Kelly Reichardt keeps it quite subtle. There's good.
I think behind every man is a
great woman. But there's some really good scene where they're, I think, walking at night, and you can kind of see the torch they're holding, like the lamp, but you can't really see the bodies. And there's lots of good scenes like that where the dialogue's very muted and they're kind of talking, whispering, and it's like, fuck, you guys are fucked. And like, you're in the middle of nowhere, you're running out of water, you're being led into the beyond by this complete charlatan, and it's amazing how polite the whole affair is, right? Did you get that impression, like it was all these kind of social norms and etiquette, like they were calling each other Mr. and Mrs., and it was like they were trying to pull civilization along with them and act like they were just still in the East, I guess. Do you think that was part of
they are losing bit by bit their civilization? Yeah. Like the bird dies, so they can afford, or they set it free, they can afford that kind of luxury. Then they keep losing personal objects, heirlooms, until you know.
The chair that gets pushed out of the cart. That's an amazing.
The chair
shot.
Gets pushed out of the part, and the clock, I think, that she throws out unceremoniously. Because in my mind, I was like, oof. I was like, why would you try and be careful? Like,
it's a lovely chair.
This lovely rocking. He's like, that's my mother's. And then he's like, be careful, that's my mother's. And then she's like, okay, sure. And then just chucks it out the back. It's really good. But I think you're right, Lara. Like they're slowly kind of shedding civilization as they go. Because I suppose they realize that this stuff's kind of useless where they are. Like the knowledge that they hold so dear and so central is like rocking chairs and clocks and passages from the Bible and like kind of elegant birds. Like this stuff is meaningless when you have no map.
And even in the connection with the Native American, there's this kind of still holding on to pride of civilization, where the character of Michelle Williams says, you don't know what we've done, the cities we've built. Like she's bragging about white culture, being this amazing technology when they can't even find water by themselves.
Yeah, it kind of shows the dependence, I guess, of civilization. So you've got cities and you've got water and you've got gold. So why did you leave?
It's like Agira Wrath of God.
Yeah, it's like secular Wrath of God. But yeah, so the question is, only compared to me now, but is why leave if everything is so great where you are? And I guess it's the underpinning story of all colonialism and all colonial enterprise. But how? Like, I'm kind of like a virgin to like a Kelly Reichardt in a film, so this is my first one. So you've both seen loads. How does this fit into like? Is there like a consistent? Is this like a typical Kelly Reichardt film?
She edits her own films. Actually, that's an interesting fact. Which is quite unusual for directors. Directors don't tend to do that. Double threat. Although she said in interviews, I'm the cheapest editor they can afford, but that's probably false modesty. I mean, they're edited very well, but they have this very distinctive editing style that if it was another editor, you might wonder if it was their style, of like things, wide shots where you can't often hear the dialogue, or you can hear the dialogue quite faintly, and then like immensely close shots. And it works particularly well with this with 4:3 Academy ratio, which is a much more it's a ratio that's much more conducive to close-ups of faces. It doesn't handle wide landscapes as well, but it does handle them perfectly well. But yeah, you have this kind of this thing between. It happens a lot in Old Joy as well. Like I was rewatching old bits of Old Joy before recording, and there are these real. It really does blot between quite wide shots and quite close shots, and there's something. Because it's not really about the characters. I mean, Old Joy has a bit more of a characterization thing about these two guys who sort of went down different paths. But I feel like that's mostly arbitrated through the dialogue rather than through a sort of Cassavetes-style character-driven rehearsal process. Which are
very psychotic almost.
Yeah, that's like the complete opposite of this. There isn't that much psychology. And it's funny seeing someone like Michelle Williams, who I first saw her in Blue Valentine, which is like a very character-driven, relationship-y kind of film. And in this film and in Wendy and Lucy, is the acting approach. I mean, she's great in it, but it is like very much less is more. And yeah, it's very subtle, her performance.
What about you, Lara? Do you think this is a kind of, how does this map on to like Kelly Reichardt's films as a whole?
Very, very Kelly Reichardt, more so that something like Night Moves or Certain Women. It's very much like Wendy and Lucy and Old Joy. Now the latest one, First Cow. Some people, usually complain about Kelly Reichardt's films, saying that they are slow, which I guess is a characteristic of her movies.
Yeah, it seems like she's doing that on purpose.
We're very tolerant of slow films here on Movie.
I was surprised because I was reading some reviews of Meek's Cutoff. I was surprised how this film unmasks many critics as normies.
Yeah.
Saying that, this is so slow, this is so painful, it's like being on the Oregon Trail. And it's not even a 2-hour movie. It's really short.
It's very easy to watch.
You're gonna survive other directors like Belatar or Lav Diaz.
Yeah. Lav Diaz, and exactly, and it's as well like it's almost like when it comes to genre films, and I think genre films are always interesting to fuck around with, like whether you're doing it kind of intentionally or not, because then you've got like Fritz Lang doing M, and kind of very early on in the history of cinema kind of doing film noir better than everyone else, or you're doing, it's almost like the Academy or the kind of film critics can only stomach, you're only allowed to fuck around with a genre film if you do it in a way that's completely appreciative and normal. Like everyone says, well, Clint Eastwood doing Unforgiven, that was the ultimate kind of deconstruction of the Western film. It's fine, it's a perfectly good film, but it's still a fucking Western film. What, the cowboy's old? Like, that's the only difference. Clint Eastwood is kind of sundowning in it. But yeah, here it's like, it's slow, but it never advertises itself as anything but being a slow film. And if anything, it's too short. Like, it finishes on a beautifully ambiguous moment. Right?
Yeah, it does actually feel like it finishes early, which is a very rare thing for any film to feel like you're watching it, the credits come up and you're like, oh, Well, that's I hope it was.
What do you? I mean, I'm gonna play a stupid parlor game here, which I think is idiotic. But what do you think? What do you think happens to them? Do you think Kelly Reichardt intends their downfall? Has she set us up to have do you think these people are worthy of being saved? Do you think they're going to be saved? Do you think they're going to find water? Do you think they are capable of surviving?
I think they're gonna be fine. For two reasons. One, the historical mixed party. Some people die, but most of them, got there fine with the help of Native Americans. And also because I don't think the film would want to, reward Meek.
Yeah.
If anything, it would want to reward Michelle Williams, Emily, in her fate than the other way around. And you want to believe the connection between Michelle Williams and the Native American is real. You want to believe, he's also searching for loneliness in this situation where he's been basically kidnapped and he's searching for kind of an ally. So you want them to be real allies mutually, and you want them to kind of triumph as much as you can triumph in this situation.
Totally, yeah, because it's kind of they make a strange duo in a way, but they do kind of support each other. I mean, not that he does much, and what I was really curious throughout was kind of like, I wish I could speak Kayuse and understand what he's saying, because there's a lot of moments where he gives the impression through his kind of mannerisms that he's got this kind of I don't know what the right word is, this dour, kind of moody attitude, and he's obviously just kind of calling them fools or idiots occasionally.
What's the situation with that? When you have a language being spoken in a film that the vast majority of viewers won't understand.
Yeah. And
also it's crucial to the plot that there's mystery surrounding what's being said.
Yeah.
What did they all write a script in that language?
Well, I think it's
they wrote in English, and they got language experts because the Cayuse dialect that they want to use is pretty much extinct.
But what was the script saying? How do you decide?
There's an article out there, if you want to.
Is there a Kelly Reichardt subreddit where?
The real Reichardt heads out there.
It keeps it ambiguous. You're not gonna be all of what happens. It's all ambiguous.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good thing in film? Because sometimes I think when it's used as an othering device, when you've got, the sort of person who's talking another language, it can be used as a kind of threatening alien, especially when you subtitle everything else and you choose not to subtitle a different language. It can sometimes other you and distance you from that that character, make them seem more distant from you, more alien from you. Do you think it would be more powerful, Lara, if Kelly Reichardt had actually subtitled his dialogue?
Yeah, I mean, it's a political decision in a way. You are further in othering a character that is already othered by the other people in the party, and by history, and by the history of Western genre. They are the punching bag of the genre. I would have kept the dialogue ambiguous, but subtitle it, so you could maybe see the distance between, what the character is saying and what the other characters think he's saying, what they are assuming, how they are projecting their hopes and their fears on him. I think it would have been interesting.
I think it would have been interesting. I can't really think of an example, sort of top of my head. I can think of plenty bad examples where, Russians have classically fulfilled this role in films where you've got the great red under the bed, and their dialogue is often not translated, and it's because they're the great Russian evil. And here, it felt like it lost out. Maybe it's interesting they chose a Cayuse, because Cayuse, like you said, the language is dead. I think there's 140 Cayuse left. I don't know. What do you think, Ralph? Do you think it would have been would you have subtitled his dialogue, a sub-named character?
I think I wouldn't have done, actually. I think it's sort of in the spirit of the film to stay on the side of the Western ignorance. I think that sort of works for me. But I also don't think it would have been I don't think it would have made much of a difference either way, because I think you sort of know that I mean, obviously, if he knew where water was and he wanted to tell them where water was, he would just be like, water there. You know what I mean? So it's like, you can more or less like glean that. Like, I mean, everyone wants water, right? There's no like cultural difference there. Like, so it's obviously he doesn't know exactly where the water is, and he's probably got a better instinct than they do. That's why they follow him. But
do you think he's lost though? Because it's ambiguous about why he's out here on his own. Like, the entire possibility is that he himself is lost, or he himself is running away from something.
I don't think the film wants you to ask those questions. I don't think Kelly Reichardt films wants you to think about the past or why the characters are there. It's inevitable because most film we consume is really obsessed with these psychological questions, but I don't think the film wants you to do that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. They're kind of they're films about the present moment, really.
Yeah, they're very, very embodied in those gestures and those moments. Which is why it was a joy to watch, right? Some slow films can be hard to watch. This really isn't. It's almost like Bressonian in a way. It's like Bresson, his kind of obsession with gesture and small things.
I kept wondering about this is my new. I mean, I'm very Bresson centric. So, and almost every time we review a film, I'm like, how is this different from Bresson? But with this film, there was I think it was even less anthropocentric than Bresson. Like, it was like the people were less important in the frame, and also a bit less about gesture and a bit more just about sound. Actually, I think the things I remember most are kind of the flowing of the stream or wind, or like fire, or like crackling fire, and the landscape. I think the landscape comes to dominate a lot more than in Bresson. But yeah, there is just like a directing style that gives a lot more space to personality, but doesn't preload any of it. Like, I think I doubt there was very much rehearsal on this film. I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I think just some filmmaking styles don't require rehearsal. Because you're just sort of dealing with a very clear set of circumstances, and then the actors, almost in a kind of Meisner style way, they just play within those circumstances.
Yeah, because presumably as well, like, there's large parts of the characters, what they are doing is simply living. They're actually driving cattle across this plain, and it can't act that, because you are focused on the moment of moving the cattle, which I'm sure to Paul Dano or whatever is quite an unusual thing he's probably not done before. So he is focused on it, or washing dishes, or you can't.
They almost always have tasks to do.
Yeah, it's like task focused, right? Yeah, you can't act fording a stream. There's no way to do that. Like, you just ford a fucking stream. I mean, probably the actors are like, fuck, this is cold. Like, like, I can't imagine it was particularly nice, kind of like going up to your shoulders in a raging stream, but.
As far as I know, she doesn't tell the actors much about what the process is going to be. And I think in this film particularly, some of the actors weren't happy about it because they didn't know, like, they would have these scenes with dialogue between the men, but the camera would be on the women. And I think some of the actors were a bit pissed off at that because they didn't know that was going to be. They thought they were going to have the focus.
That's quite good in a way, because I guess it puts people on edge slightly, and if you want, these characters are supposed to be on edge, I guess.
And the animals, they were shooting with a lot of animals, so that would keep everybody on their toes.
I mean, that's the great thing about animals. The best and worst thing about working with animals on film is that animals aren't self-conscious. They don't perform. They don't know they're being filmed. So in a way, that's sort of like for a certain style of acting, that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? To be as unself-conscious as an animal.
How do you feel about westerns in general?
Do you know what? I know you said Lara, you said you're not a fan, right? I was brought up on the diet that my dad is an avid Western fan, right? Which I think comes with a lot of my dad isn't divorced, but he's got he's always had divorced dad energy about him. But he's Yeah, he's psychically divorced. But he loves westerns. He really does. And so I from a young age, I watched a lot of them. I enjoy it when it's done well. Like, I don't enjoy the stupidity of John Wayne, but I think, kind of like I said, when you can kind of deconstruct genres, I think they become really interesting. And I think Deadwood. I was talking about Deadwood to you the other day, Ralph. Have you seen Deadwood, Lara?
It's only one of my favorite shows ever.
Yes.
I love it.
Great. There we go. Like, I fucking love Deadwood. Like, and yeah, it's a western in the same way that I guess Meek's Cutoff is a western, but
isn't this always the thing with genre? Like, well, not really, because some people do love genre, but a lot of the time, like arty types like us will sort of say that our favorite version of a genre is, and then we'll say like some Tarkovsky or someone who doesn't really do
the best science fiction is Solaris, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I like genre. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think genre done well is like nothing like watching a well constructed like thriller or whatever. Like, it's a joy to watch. But yeah, like westerns. I guess westerns are difficult, are lovely only. What about you, Ralph? How are your feelings about western genre? Are you?
Honestly, it's a big gap for me. I've seen A Fistful of Dollars, and I think I've seen Red River as well. But the sort of American culture from which, the most well-known westerns come from, I don't find it doesn't. And I was watching when we were researching the famously contentious Jodorowsky episode. I tried to do El Topo, and all my reservations about westerns and my reservations about Jodorowsky seem to combine in a firework of reservations.
Well,
so yeah, overall, I'm not a huge westerns fan, but I'm willing to be, I'm willing to watch more westerns.
I think it's more like America never had, like the Soviet Union, as it were, a state-sanctioned propaganda. But it does have genres as propaganda as standards for it. And the West itself is America's founding mythology, like modern America's founding mythology. And westerns, like the John Ford westerns you mentioned, I guess, are the propaganda films of America. So we treat them with a kind of, maybe I'm wrong about that, but we kind of treat them with a kind of like the same way we might treat watching how the steel was tempered in Russia or something. And we kind of treat it with a kind of the same attitude that you treat propaganda, or because they fulfill the same purpose, right? Macho frontiersman goes and conquers the savage natives.
And they justify settler colonial. So are there like genre films about the Raj that like justify the British Empire, like about the trains and stuff? Like, is the East India Company? Like, no, it's like really. No, but English people never really bothered to shore up their conquests with like trashy films.
That might be debatable. I can't come back to you on that, because I'm like, maybe it's true, but no, it was, because I think Kind Hearts and Coronets. Like, I think there is definitely like
that's a great film.
Tradition of,
what are you on about?
A great film, but like there's definitely a tradition of films which are set in the Raj and are set in the Empire.
Wait, Kind Hearts and Coronets isn't set in the Raj.
Let's talk. Is it not? Of course, what am I going on about?
It's an Ealing comedy about someone who kills various members of their family, all played by Alec Guinness.
Oh, for fuck's sake, I've completely fucked up.
That is propaganda for the British.
That is propaganda for the British.
There we are.
I'm thinking of something else entirely. Fuck it, whatever.
The Jewel in the Crown is what you're thinking of.
Jewel in the Crown,
which is a TV series based on a long novel series by Paul Scott, and it was a TV series made for ITV. But I would say that the Jewel in the Crown is quite critical of the Empire.
Well, I mean, westerns are still critical of, like, there is still undercurrent of malevolence and evil. And I think with the UK, you've got films like Zulu, a war film which completely justifies the heroism of pointless British escapades and British blood being spilled in Africa, for example. I think Britain does do it. I think war films for Britain, I think. England.
Oh yeah. That's where we go. That's where we go for propaganda.
It's war films for the UK. It's westerns for America. It's war films for England.
Thank you very much, Lara, for joining us on this special episode.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for bringing some actual insight. You said you would bring some skills and expertise, and you've done it with your incredible back knowledge of Kelly Reichardt and of this film specifically, which we don't have. It's made us look very good by association.
Next week we're turning back to our Neanderthal roots with Daniel Neofitu, who is going to be.
Oh, weren't you gonna talk about Christmas movies at some point?
Yes, we're gonna review It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which I've never seen.
But you're in for a treat, mate.
But Daniel and Owen both have strong opinions about it, so we're gonna
we differ deeply. I think it is a deeply provincial, conservative film, which is a call for. It's an acceptance of kind of. Suburban failure being the kind of post-war consensus.
Save it for Christmas.
No, I'm just so rigorous. Lara, do you agree? Because like Daniel was like, oh no, it's actually a really radical, like critical film. It's kind of anti-capitalist. What do you think?
I think it's kind of both at the same time, and I've been going back and forth about that. But I think I'm becoming more skeptical about Capra in general as I watch more, classic cinema, and I have different thoughts on classic cinema than when I was like 20. So I'm glad someone is gonna drag Capra. Yeah.
Yes, I'm gonna be there. I'm dragging Capra next week because like Daniel is wrong, but we'll hear it all next week when we do our Christmas ep.